Hey, MissFlame here. In this video I'm gonna show you how to paint Silas from Zombicide Black Plague. Let me first show you my painted miniature. So now I have also painted Silas. I did enjoy painting him quite a bit, but before I painted it, I was actually struggling a bit. I was unsure on the colors that I would use, especially on the cape he's wearing and his shirt. The cape he's wearing is such a big part of the miniature, and I really wanted to have a color that I really like and that would fit him well. Also, I wanted Silas to stand out from the other miniatures. For example, if you look at the shirt he's wearing, the colors of it, and if you look at the robe that Baldric is wearing, it is pretty much the same color. I've already painted Baldric, and I painted the robe in the color Skeleton Bone, so I did not want to do that exact same color for Silas. So I looked at my colors, played around with it, mixed it a bit, and then I mixed Plague Brown with Skeleton Bone. Really like that result, so I chose that as the color for the shirt. So now I had the color for the shirt, which was really great because that helped me a lot. I still had to figure out the color for the cape, and when I look at the artwork, it has like a green. It's green, like there's a green tone in it, but it's not super obvious. So it's not like a bright green color, but it has like maybe a brown tone, yellowish with green, and it's like a softer color also. So I was like, okay, maybe more of a camouflage green, but then even softer. I started mixing different colors of green with different colors of brown, but that didn't really work. So I went back to the colors that I've already have for the shirt, which is Plague Brown and Skeleton Bone. Then I started to mix those with the green colors, and that's how I found my green color for the cape that I really like. Let me show you what I did. Let's paint. I primed the miniature in the color Matte White from the Army Painter. Before I primed the miniature, I washed it with warm water and dishwasher soap to make sure the primer stays on well. For the skin, I used the colors Rosy Flash with Pale Flash from Vallejo. I'll mix these colors with a 50-50 ratio, so 1 drop of Rosy Flash mixed with 1 drop of Pale Flash. Unfortunately, something went wrong when I was recording this step, therefore I can't show you a part when I was painting it. I applied 2 thin layers on all the skin areas. For his hair, I used the color Chink Orange from scale 75. I used 3 thin layers to get good coverage. I want the paint to get in all the recesses of the miniature. Try not to paint over the flesh areas as much as you can. If you do make a mistake, you can easily retouch it with the skin color. I like this color for his hair. It's a brown color with an orange tone in it. For his shirt and pants, I used the colors Skeleton Bone from the Army Painter with Plague Brown from Vallejo. I will use a ratio of 2:1, with 2 drops of Skeleton Bone with 1 drop of Plague Brown. I needed 2 layers to get good coverage. Try to paint over some of the areas next to it, to make sure you will not have any white dots later on. For the cloth under his shirt, I used the colors Gory Red with Scarlet Blood from Vallejo. I used a 50-50 mix of these colors, with 1 drop of Gory Red and 1 drop of Scarlet Red. I applied 3 thin layers on the miniature. For the cape, I used the colors Cayman Green with Plague Brown from Vallejo. I'll mix these colors with a 2:1 ratio. I'll mix 1 drop of Cayman Green with 2 drops of Plague Brown. I applied 3 thin layers to get good coverage. The area to paint is pretty big. Make sure to paint the whole cape and don't miss a part. For the shoes, I used the color Bosh Chestnut from scale 75. Here I also applied 3 thin layers for good coverage. This brown is a pretty dark color. I am painting over the white primer. That is why I needed 3 layers. If you paint over a darker color, you probably need less layers to paint. For all the leather parts, I used the color Blackert Brown from scale 75. I applied 3 layers to get good coverage. I painted his belt, pouch, braces and quiver with this color. For the bow and arrows on his back, I used the color Bonewhite from Vallejo. I used 1 thin layer to get good coverage. To paint this color over the white primer is very easy, therefore 1 layer was enough. Most of the surrounding areas are already painted. This makes it a bit more tricky to paint. For the sword on his right side, I used the color Petroleum Grey from scale 75. I used 1 layer to get good coverage. Although this is a very dark color, it covers pretty well and therefore only 1 layer was needed. Well, maybe I did a little bit of retouching, but that is all. For the gold pieces on his shoes and the sword hilt, I used the colors Plague Brown and Polished Gold. On the shoes, I noticed I painted over these parts with a darker color. I want the color to be a bright gold. That is why I first paint with the color Plague Brown and I will later on go over it with the color Polished Gold. I do the same for the sword hilt to make sure the colors look the same. For the metal parts, I use the color Chainmal Silver from Vallejo. I paint the armor piece, buckles, sword in his hand and the details on the sword on his right side with this color. This is the miniature with all the base colors on it. Now I will apply the shade. I will start with Reikland Fleshshade from Citadel for the skin. I'll apply it on all these skin areas of the miniature. If you use too much shade, you can easily remove any excess spools with your brush. You do this to first dry your brush a bit on a paper towel, then you can easily soak up any excess shade. For all the other areas, I use the colors Agrax Earthshade with Nuln Oil from Citadel. I will use a mix of 1 drop of Nuln Oil, 2 drops of Agrax Earthshade, and I will also use 2 drops of water. I will apply this to all the areas, just not the skin. After this shade, I will go back with the base colors to bring back these colors. The shades made the base colors a lot darker. For the skin, I will use Rosy Flesh with Pale Flesh, and for his eyes, I use Black from Vallejo. For the skin, I will use again a 50-50 ratio. I will not paint in the recesses. Before I painted the base, I took a good look at the miniature with the already painted heroes. Because I thought his skin was too pink at the end, before I paint the base, I also mixed in 1 drop of brown sand to redo the skin. I will paint 1 dot of black in his left eye. Then, before I paint his next eye, I will look at the miniature first to see where I want the other dot to be, and then I try to put it there. For his hair, I will use the color Chink Orange from scale 75. I will use a little bit of paint on my brush and paint the raised areas of his hair. I will leave the recesses with a darker color. If you use too much paint on your brush, the paint will go into the recesses. For his shirt and pants, I use the colors Plague Brown from Vallejo with Skeleton Bone from the Army Painter. This time I will use more skeleton bone. I will still use a ratio of 1 to 2, but this time 2 bigger drops of skeleton bone with a smaller drop of Plague Brown. I leave the darker color in the recesses and paint the other areas. For the skirt, I use the colors Gory Red with Scarlet Blood from Vallejo. I used a 50-50 mix of these colors. Unfortunately, something went wrong when I was filming this part. This is what the end result is. First, I paint the raised areas of the skirt and leave the darker areas in the recesses. After that, I went with pure Gory Red to paint some extra highlights on the most raised parts of the skirt. For all the leather parts, I use the color Blackert Brown from scale 75. I will use a little bit of paint on my brush. I will mainly paint the raised areas and also the edges of the belt and pouch. To have better control of the paint in these small areas, I try not to use too much paint at a time on my brush. For the cape, I use the colors Cayman Green with Plague Brown from Vallejo. I'll mix these colors with a 2 to 1 ratio. I'll mix 1 drop of Cayman Green with 2 drops of Plague Brown. I will use thin layers of paint. For that reason, I needed 2 layers to get the coverage I liked. This part is a bit harder. You want to leave the darker parts in the recesses. This will show the flow of the cape when you look at the miniature from a distance when it's on the table. I start by painting the raised parts and work my way down to the lower parts. For the metal and gold parts I use the colors Chainmal Silver, Silver and Polished Gold from Vallejo. I start by applying a thin layer of Chainmal Silver to all the metal parts, just to bring the shine back. After that I will use pure silver to paint the edge of the armor, the sword on his right side, and for the sword he is holding I only paint the side which is next to his face. Then I will use polished gold to bring back the shine of the gold areas. I use a thin layer of gold. Before I paint the base I went back with the skin color, but this time I also mixed in 1 drop of brown sand. I did not like the skin color when I compared Silas to the other heroes. This is the result. For the base I will use the colors Thar Brown with Mojave White and Brown Gray from scale 75. I will first apply 2 thin layers of a 50-50 mix of Thar Brown with Mojave White. I will apply this on the whole base, so also on the edge of the base. When that is dry, I will use Brown Gray to paint the patterns of the stones on the base. The patterns of the stones in the artwork are not super straight, but actually a bit messy. For the details on the base, I use the colors Off-White from Vallejo and Hykey Yellow and Arbuckles Brown from scale 75. I will use the Off-White and Hykey Yellow to paint 3 to 4 stones on the base in that color. For the side of the base, I use the color Arbuckle Brown. Let the brush and angle work for you. I paint the side of the base with the side of my brush. I use 2 thin layers. Now that the miniature is all done, I will let the paint dry for at least 24 hours before I apply the Quickshade on the base. Here I apply the Quickshade in the color Strong Tone from the Army Painter on the base. I will only apply it on the base, not the rest of the miniature. After letting the Quickshade dry for at least 48 hours, I use the Anti-Shine Matte Varnish from the Army Painter. I hope you enjoyed watching this tutorial. If you have any questions, you can always leave them in the comments below. Did this help you paint your miniature? Did you do something different? Let me know.